This is the Motherlands podcast. The intention of this podcast is to provide evidence-based information related to fertility, pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, as well as share positive birth stories. I am your host, Keely Semler. The episode you're about to hear is chock full of incredible information and education on lactation and breastfeeding. Even if you aren't breastfeeding, I promise you will learn something super fascinating when you listen to this episode. But before I introduce the guests, just a friendly reminder that if you have been enjoying the Motherlands podcast, please write a review and leave a rating. I would love to continue interviewing guests for the Motherlands, and writing a review and leaving a rating are simple ways for Motherlands to be visible to other listeners. Thank you so much. Today's guests are Jennifer Davidson and Kimmy Mills. They are a team of lactation consultants best known as the Milky Way Mamas. They are on a mission to educate and empower clients on the amazing benefits of breastfeeding and nursing. They are involved in several community outreach projects, such as The Art of Nurture, which is a project that normalizes breastfeeding through art by installing muraled benches throughout Los Angeles where people can comfortably nurse their babies in public. In addition to The Art of Nurture, Jennifer co-produced a feature-length documentary film called The Milky Way, which honors mothers and displays the beauty and connection of the breastfeeding relationship. Our conversation covers a variety of common breastfeeding topics, such as milk supply, engorgement, thrush, and mastitis. While honoring the unique journey of every nursing mother, Jennifer and Kimmy share helpful tips and resources so that new mothers feel both supported and validated. We are here with Kimmy Mills and Jennifer Davidson in Kimmy Mills' beautiful, lovely, cozy living room. Thank you for hosting us. I'm so glad that you guys were willing to sit down and chat today, and hopefully everything you guys will share can be helpful for people on their journey in new parenthood, new motherhood. So I'm wondering if you guys could introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Jennifer. I've lived in LA for my whole life, and I've been working as a pediatric nurse for 40 years. And I love working with moms and babies and families as a lactation consultant now for about 25 years in my pediatric practice, because I get to see all the moms when they're pregnant, come to their home once the baby's born, and just help the whole family along and guide them. So, and then I had the great fortune of meeting Kimmy 2 years ago now. We're working together to create and have created now a little lactation business, which we hope will grow. And we're carrying on in the tradition of a movie that I created with my partner Chantal, movie partner. And together we created a movie called The Milky Way, which we wanted it to be a movie to support moms to really understand what it means to trust your bodies, trust your babies, and trust yourself. And to be lifted up in a world where women are not lifted up. And that's our whole mission today. Also, we made it.
Love it.
My name is Kimmy. I have 2 young kids. Well, I guess they're not really that young anymore. They're 7 years old is my son, and I have a daughter who will be 10 shortly. And prior to having children, I worked as an environmental scientist for about 10 years. And then after I had my kids, I was fortunate enough to be able to take some time off when they were little to just, focus my energy on them. I loved breastfeeding my babies. It was like one of the best experiences of my time as a mom. And I just really wanted to be able to help other people do it too. And I had a challenging time with both of my kids for various reasons.
So this episode for listeners is all about lactation, understanding lactation and support around breastfeeding. My first question for you guys is, when it comes to breastfeeding, when you're speaking to someone new who's either pregnant or newly postpartum with their brand new baby, what are some important things they need to consider in the first few weeks after giving birth to their baby? What could they do to prepare?
Good questions.
I would say the first thing they can do to prepare is watch the movie.
Oh, good idea. Thank you, Kimmy.
That'll give a lot of information on everything involving like new motherhood, and also depending on where they're delivering, if they're planning to deliver in a hospital, it'll give some guidance on kind of how the hospital is set up for new moms and how they might want to learn to advocate for themselves.
We think that the world out there has all the answers for us because they're the experts. But what we've come to learn is that there's a lot of misinformation that goes around in this culture. So it's really important to get good information about how the body works. And I think Kimmy and I just go back and forth always to the basics, which is once the baby is born, just when the baby comes skin to skin on the mother's chest, it elicits just this cascade of hormones that help the mother to bond, help the baby to find its way to the breast, helps the milk to begin to come in. We can't say that enough. The place that the baby belongs once born is on the mother's chest. Mm-hmm. And the hospital does a lot of things like washing the baby and checking the baby. And if it's really important, absolutely. But as soon as possible, bring that baby back to the chest to live on mother.
Some of those things can be done on the baby too. You know?
Yes, and as much as possible, advocate for your baby to never be separate from the mother. And if it has to be, let the dad take off his shirt and live on the dad.
I love that. So, thrush, what is it?
Thrush is candida or yeast cells that have just kind of taken over. And a really important thing to know is we have yeast cells that live in our body harmoniously all the time. But when you've had antibiotics, say you had strep and you needed antibiotics at birth or right before birth, it can offset. Or if you needed antibiotics anytime along the way, it's not uncommon for a mom then to get thrush on her nipples because that's where the baby's nursing a lot. So it grows more readily in a warm, wet, sweet, milky environment. So it'll be on her nipples, on the baby's bottom that's covered up with a diaper, moist, covered all the time. And also on the baby's tongue. It's not uncommon to get it there. And how we will suggest to get rid of it is basically to know that it's not a dangerous thing, but it can cause discomfort, certainly. And sometimes you don't even know you have it on your nipples. You just get cracked nipples and they don't seem to heal. Which we always say, work on the latch. But if that still is not working, sometimes you discover, and you can also feel shooting pains, sometimes up into the ducts. That might be a sign that it's yeast. And the best way to handle it is, once you know you have it. Sometimes you don't know and you just treat it anyway, and that's not dangerous. And that is, I like to start with the more natural things, which are things like baking soda baths on your nipples, on the baby's tongue, on the bottom. It's like a handful of baking soda in a little bath of water. You can also do vinegar washes. You can do sitz baths for the baby in baking soda and water if they have it on their bottom. Those are natural ways, and even the grapefruit seed extract, it's 10 drops in an ounce of water on the tongue, on the nipples, little washes, right? It's very, very hot, staining, what's the word? Kind of stinging, I guess you could say, right on the yeast if it's direct. So make sure that you dilute it.
And it's a rash on the baby's bottom, or what does it look like?
Thank you. On the baby's bottom, it's more clear to see that it's like little satellites of red that do not heal. So it looks like a diaper rash with little red satellites that don't go away. And it can be anywhere around the anal area or just on the whole little perineum of the baby. Can be on the mother's nipple and on the baby's tongue and mouth. What it looks like is not that white, smooth, coated tongue, but it's more patches of white. Looks like growth.
Got it.
And they're really fussy.
Got it. And that's the yeast.
And that's the yeast thrush. And so you can do the grapefruit seed extract, the vinegar wash, or the baking soda wash. Those are all great. If it becomes more serious for the mother and the baby's bottom, there's next steps, which are you have your antifungal creams. You can call your doctor, get a prescription. You can go over the counter and get the clotrimazole, which is the same thing they treat athlete's foot with, just so everybody knows, because it's less expensive in the men's section for athlete's foot than it is for gynecological.
Of course. Everything for men is cheaper. Yeah.
So using that cream, if it's more serious, little hydrocortisone, because your nipples can be very painful with it. And people will ask, oh, is that safe to do while the baby's nursing? So what you do is you put it on right after nursing, leave that on. So have you heard of Apno cream? People talk about that one. And it's all-purpose nipple cream. And what that actually is a little bit of hydrocortisone, an antibiotic cream, and the antifungal mixture. You can layer that on over the counter, onto your nipples, onto the baby's bottom. But I always like to say, if you're not in my practice, perhaps you should talk to your doctor once we're talking prescription things, right?
Right. So something you just mentioned that I'm wondering about is you said sometimes the new mother can feel like a shooting pain up the nipple. And, being that I support new mothers as a birth doula and as a midwife assistant, I do see that sometimes new mothers, when they're learning how to figure out the latch, sometimes that just comes with trial and error. So how does a new mom distinguish or differentiate between I have thrush, there's shooting pain up my nipple, versus I'm just trying to perfect the latch? Yeah.
Well, I would never just start with saying, oh, this must be thrush.
Right.
Because it's so common to have painful nipples in the beginning because the baby just isn't latching on deep enough. So first we should perfect that. But if there's consistent pain, even after you get the good latches and you see crack, there's various ways that yeast looks on the nipple. You can even have the white thrush like the baby had in its mouth on the nipple. So there's a little more going on fixing that latch.
That's
Usually
great.
Once you fix the latch, you're better within a day or two.
That's awesome. Mastitis. What is that?
You want to do it?
Sure. So mastitis is milk that sits in our ducts and gets infected, or the surrounding area gets infected. It's usually happens after, if you're super engorged, which I assume is maybe our next buzzword. But if you have a ton of milk just sitting in your breasts that you're not able to express, or it just stays there and it can't get out, sometimes it can cause an infection. So typically with mastitis, the first thing you're going to feel before you experience mastitis is probably a clogged duct. Most people are going to experience that, and then if you don't remedy the clogged duct, that's what then will cause the infection. And a clogged duct is going to feel like a little stone or like a little hard part somewhere in your breast. And you can, as you're breastfeeding, it's a good idea generally to feel around your breast, make sure that everything feels good. If you do feel a bit of a hard area, to put a little bit of extra gentle pressure on it while your baby's nursing so that you can help the baby get the milk out. And then if that escalates into mastitis, you're going to notice, in addition to feeling a little bit of that harder area on your breast, you might see some redness where that duct is. You might start to feel flu-like symptoms. Maybe you'll get a fever, you'll get the chills, your body will ache, you'll feel like you're getting sick. And that is your clue that, oh, maybe I have an infection. Typically, we see that mastitis happens after the mom has been doing too much. So our bodies really crave rest and relaxation after birth. And our society tells us to go to the grocery store and take your baby for a walk. So a lot of times we see gosh, I don't feel very good. I have this red spot on my breast. What do I do? And okay, well, what else is going on? Oh, well, yesterday I went to the mall and I, did X, Y, Z. It's okay. So the things to remember are preventing mastitis is easy by nursing your baby often. So the more you're removing the milk from your breasts, the better. And then also if you are experiencing mastitis, rest, take the day or 2 days and just lay in your bed. Don't move with your baby, obviously. Nurse on that side, because what we're trying to do is get the milk out. You can use some cabbage leaves or some cold packs to kind of help with the inflammation and the swelling. And then sometimes people also like to use a little bit of heat to then help the milk out of your breast. If after 24 hours of kind of monitoring, if it subsides on its own, then you just know, okay, I need to pay attention to my body, listen, rest, chill out a little bit. If it gets worse, if you notice it's getting redder, harder, your fever is, going up, not down, then we would recommend contacting your doctor for antibiotics. But antibiotics are kind of like the last step in the mastitis treatment. They're not the first. They're not the go-to.
Right.
Unless it escalates.
Yeah.
We usually say that you can clear it within 24 hours. And I think the most important is rest and emptying.
Yeah.
And then once that has occurred for a good 24 hours, if your fever and the redness aren't subsiding, then absolutely antibiotics are okay. And they're okay with breastfeeding.
Yeah, and you're okay with breastfeeding. And there's also some other things. You can up your vitamin C, drink lots of water.
There's the
sunflower.
Homeopathics.
Yeah. Some people recommend sunflower lecithin, which we wouldn't recommend taking all the time, but to help clear it, it can be useful.
Then the homeopathics are the phytolacca and the
sulfur.
That's the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Those two were told to me early on when I was a breastfeeding mama, and so I'm passing those along.
I love homeopathic remedies. I have a lot of my clients use them to prepare for labor and birth.
Yes.
Yeah, and they really work.
They really do. I got to use them too with mine. I kind of forget about it because it's not a common thing in our culture at all.
I know. Yeah.
Castor oil packs too.
Yeah, castor oil packs is another one. You can put castor oil on a pad and a little bit of warmth and put it on your mastitis. It's pretty obvious. You'll see a big red splotch on your breast, and that's exactly where you want to gently massage, and also where you want to put like a castor oil pack or put a cabbage leaf just right on that redness.
I love that you can use a cabbage leaf to help with that.
And the cabbage usually goes with the cold, and so when we say, what is it, hot or cold? You can alternate. And I always say, whatever feels like what you'd like to do, that's the one that's for you.
I love that. You alluded to this one already, Kimmy, but engorgement. And so my question with engorgement is, you said with a clogged duct that you'll feel sometimes something in the duct. So how can someone differentiate engorgement versus a clogged duct? And I guess what is engorgement is where we should start.
Engorgement usually happens when your milk is coming in the early days after you've given birth. And not every single mom will get engorged, which is interesting. So it's not just, it's for sure going to happen, but it's good to know about it and be prepared and prevent it if possible. And because milk comes in usually day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, kind of keeps coming in, if the baby's not emptying the breast fully, which they usually don't, especially if you were a mom who's about to have a lot of milk, then your breast can become engorged, and that just means really full breasts that are super uncomfortable, and she feels overloaded and very heavy, and they're hot, a little bit hot, but they're not mastitis. The difference is redness and fever tells you it's mastitis. Engorgement is just this very full, overall, generalized full breast, and they can be rock hard when they get really serious, which makes it really hard to get a good deep latch. So one thing to do if you are engorged and are having trouble latching your baby is to do some areola compression before baby latches to really soften the areola so baby can get on deeper. That's important. And then the way to prevent it is nursing both breasts frequently. So we will say in the early days it's a good idea to do one breast, then till the baby starts to slow down, 15, 20 minutes in, switch. You don't have to continue this method forever, but just in the early days to prevent mastitis, emptying both breasts because they work independently of each other.
Right, and usually there's one overachiever breast
yes.
and one underachiever, but both need to be stimulated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you switch for the one you start with each time.
That helps to try to even them. Babies will take the majority of their feed in the first 10-ish minutes. And so if you're consistently starting on the same side, that side is going to have more production over time. And so if you switch which side you're starting on, then you're telling your body, make milk on both sides.
Yeah, that's great.
And if you're having trouble, really getting to the other breast, which is sometimes, this one's really hard for me. It's common to have like one breast that's really hard to latch onto.
Either for yourself, because if you're left-handed, it might be easier to latch on one side than the other, or for the babies.
Or the babies
have, after the babies might have they come out and their body could be a little bit tight. They might have a side preference. They might have an injury. Different ways to help the baby with positioning, with helping them with their latch to make sure that they can get on both sides.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm wondering, you said sometimes a baby can have an injury with birth, which is very true. So it has me wondering if someone's birth experience can impact their milk supply.
Oh, yeah. Certainly ease of breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm.
100%.
Say more.
Yeah. Okay. This came to me through observation because I've been in this field for so long. And I've always felt like it was very, very hard for many moms to breastfeed. Started realizing that these moms weren't having the same trouble that they were having in the hospital.
So you used to work in the hospital?
I worked as a postpartum nurse in a hospital, plus most of my clients give birth in a hospital. Mm-hmm. But then there are some who do home births. Mm-hmm. And I can say pretty much hands down that the home birth, just the whole energy behind it is that the baby goes right to the chest and no one interferes. That's the secret. Mm-hmm. And the drugs involved in a birth with all sorts of additives to interfere as well, because the baby isn't quite as alert, quite as ready.
But I think it's also just when you're held in birth as a mom, and when you're able to make decisions for yourself, and when you're the one in power in your birth experience, all of that helps guide your postpartum journey, your motherhood journey. I think there's so much to be said for just having that birth experience, feeling that empowerment, and however you choose to feel that. So whether that's at home, whether that's in the hospital, whether that's unmedicated or an epidural, like just as the mom, you getting to make those decisions and feeling really confident in your choices and having a team of supportive people around you, helping you feel your power, I think is something that like propels us into how to handle motherhood and how to make sure that we're advocating for ourselves in postpartum and with breastfeeding and everything that comes with that too.
Those are good words.
Yeah, and I think it also has to do with safety. Whatever the mom feels safe, not in her head, but in her body.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes on paper, and this is kind of my work as a doula, is helping people figure out what their body is going to feel safe. And sometimes that doesn't always line up with what they think in their mind.
We were talking about this on the phone today, about how we don't live in our bodies.
No, we
very
don't.
often. And birth is such a time where if you're not used to living in your body, it can feel really scary because you're there, you know?
You have no other choice
but to get into that body.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think that it's like that inner knowing of I am safe in my body in this space, so you can really go inwards, because you have to go inwards in a way you've never gone before. Like there's no other experience in life that will mirror childbirth.
As lactation consultants, do you help your clients in the early days, perhaps spotting tongue ties, lip ties with the infant, and how do you navigate that?
Very gently. Yes, we do it very delicately. First, I think it's really important just to take a look at the baby. You can chime in with me. Take a look at the baby while you're in observation and explain to the parent, I'd like to look at their mouth as well, just to check and make sure there are no tongue ties and things. And they go, what's that? So you're educating all the way around. We talk about lip ties, tongue ties. And so together I help the parent, look over my shoulder so we're looking together at what we're seeing. And so we look to see that the baby's tongue can extend, can lift and rest comfortably on the roof of the mouth, and can also have a nice strong suck and pull, can cup the finger nicely. So you're doing the full mouth check as a lactation consultant. Sometimes you can just see it obviously right up front. If a little tie comes right up to the tip of the tongue, baby's tongue can't even slip out without a heart shape occurring. And that's absolute tongue tie where it's really tight and hard. The whole goal is that the tongue can extend past the nipple and onto the areola and draw in the milk on the ducts far back so it doesn't hurt. So sometimes we see little ones and we'll say, well, everybody has a tongue tie of some sort or another. You don't call it a tie, but we Everybody has a frenulum. Some are tighter than others, and they have a purpose. But how, if it's to the point of tightness that's affecting how well the baby can extract milk or how much pain there is in the nipple, then that's where maybe something should be done about it. And if we see that together with the parent and she continues to feel discomfort, we don't like to rush into things unless it's very obvious. But if it's continuous and definitely there's something going on, then we'll suggest she goes and sees a specialist. Usually the dentists are good at that now.
Yeah, there's pediatric dentists who specialize in oral restrictions. All of us have frenulums, so it's about the anatomy of the mouth and the function, right? So how well can that baby transfer milk? Is the mom in pain? It's a whole person experience. Yeah. And it's between the dyad too, because sometimes looking at just like with the visual or a check of the baby's mouth, you're like, everything looks okay, but the mom's continuously having the same nipple pain in the same area, and it's about the dyad and the function of the mouth.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So sometimes people are quick to say every single tie should be remedied, even if they're just little ones. Our goal is not to cause as little intervention as possible, but if it's needed, we're not afraid of suggesting it. But we don't want to be quick to scare anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a surgery.
Mm-hmm. It is a little surgery, and it can it cause an impact on the baby? We've seen that it can, and it does it always? Usually not. Usually it's just a quick little removal. There's a laser in 15 seconds and it's released. But can there be some after discomfort? Yes. And do they need to continually do little exercises to keep it open? Yes. And so it's involved.
Yeah, and of course the baby's probably a little uncomfortable through that healing process. So interfering as little as possible so not to disturb that connection, that bond with the mother and baby, I would assume is pretty important.
It is. I think we're more careful than we are ready to jump.
And I think
it's trendy right now.
I mean, unless it's a situation where you just see like, oh my gosh, like this is so necessary to be taken care of today. It's like, well, you can still be at home for a while. You don't have to rush to the dentist. We're not like, go tomorrow. It's just like, well, let's keep talking about this. Let's see let's keep watching it. And if things don't improve, then in a week or in 2 weeks, then you go and you make an appointment.
Yeah. And it sounds like the way that you both approach your practice as a lactation consultant is that when you work with a client, you're checking in on them periodically. It's not just a one and done consult. Like you are checking in on your clients to make sure they're on a good trajectory.
And we offer that as part of our practice, that they have a continual correspondence with us for as long as they breastfeed, which we're hoping is anywhere from 2 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Whatever they want it to be.
Yeah.
Or the baby wants it to be.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Great. I love that. How does food impact someone's milk supply? And are there certain foods that someone might want to consider minimizing if they're, wanting to breastfeed? And what about foods to boost supply?
We love to start with the premise of we want you to enjoy breastfeeding. So that what goes with that is eat the foods you enjoy, because that's going to make you feel the best. Mm-hmm. Are there foods that can interfere? Sometimes. And is it the same with every mom? No, because every baby and mom are different. Are there foods that promote milk and breastfeeding? And I say, all the foods you love. Plus, foods that are high in iron, because you've lost blood and you need to create lots of good blood flows to help your milk supply grow. So foods high in iron, and those are your dark leafy greens. And if you're a meat eater, you can eat your red meats. So all the foods that are high in iron are great. So dark leafy greens, brown rice, barley, oats. The oats and the grains aren't so much in the iron, but they're also known to be a little bit galactagogue, meaning milk producing. But as far as foods to stay away from,
we don't usually recommend that.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. Because everybody's so unique. And it usually doesn't show up right away. Like if a baby's sensitive to dairy, you don't usually see that right off the bat. But we will say, if your baby continues to be really fussy, gassy, crying a lot, If your baby has a reflux, if your baby has lots of rashes, if your baby has blood in the stool, those can be signs of a sensitivity to a food. And those usually come a little later, not in the
When
first
later,
weeks.
like 6 months, 4 months?
2 months.
2 months, okay.
Somewhere after the first
6
month.
weeks.
6 weeks, 2 months, somewhere in there.
But even then, we wouldn't necessarily say, okay, cut it all out. We say, okay, why don't you keep a journal? Keep a log. Pay attention to what you're eating. Pay attention to the baby. Watch your baby. I think with everything we say, watch your baby. Pay attention to your baby and see. And then we can notice some patterns. Oh, okay. And I mean, I should say, if there was blood in the stool, you want to go to the pediatrician immediately. But with the other ones.
But all of those, the reflux and everything, you probably will go to the doctor.
Want to go to the doctor to check out.
But those are usually a sign of an allergy.
Mm-hmm.
And I have often found even reflux as a dairy. Usually dairy is the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
The wheat, the eggs, the soy.
The rest of them
don't take as
long.
But
dairy, I think, is at least about a month.
Wow.
That you would notice a difference if it is dairy.
Oh,
That's a
interesting.
long time. But thank God there's all kinds of nice dairy alternatives. Not
Yeah.
so much cheese, but there are other wonderful alternatives to
Right.
milk and yogurt.
It's important to remember that our milk isn't made from our digestive system. So our milk is made from our blood. So the things that we eat, we are processing them differently than our baby is going to receive them. For example, if you were to get food poisoning, and that's like a digestive system issue for the mom, the baby's not going to get food poisoning.
And if the mother gets a virus,
the
baby will not get it.
baby doesn't get the virus through the milk. In fact, the baby gets antibodies from
So
the
that
virus through the milk.
For that
So I think
virus.
I think
So
that's a distinction that's important for people to understand, because I think it's confusing. They're getting the vitamins, nutrients, the minerals, but they're not getting like our stomach.
So another way to put that I heard was so nice in a study I read once was that if a mother eats only bread and water, her milk consistency is going to be as nutritious as the woman who eats this very healthy diet. The difference is the mother suffers.
Right.
So that's why we always just reiterate, it's so important in postpartum to take care of yourself as the mom and to feel healthy in your body, to feel like you're eating good food, to feel like you're being cared for, to feel like you're being loved, because that is what we're needing to be able to make the milk, to be with the baby, to pass that on. But
That's lovely.
So food in postpartum is to nourish the mom.
What are your thoughts on breastfeeding and consuming alcohol?
If you have a problem with alcohol, that's a completely different situation. This is just for people who are drinking
Occasional glass of
wine, having a beer with dinner, that kind of
One
thing.
martini.
So the amount of alcohol that gets into breast milk is about 2% of whatever you're consuming. So it's a really, really small amount. So usually what we would tell our moms is, if you want to have a glass of wine with dinner, that's completely fine. We would suggest nursing your baby first, having a glass of wine right away, and then by the time your baby nurses in the next 2-ish hours, that alcohol is going to be out of your system. I think that in the past there was this air quotes pump and dump situation, and that really isn't necessary for a glass of wine at dinner. As soon as the alcohol is out of your blood, it's also out of your breast milk. It's not just sitting there in your milk waiting for
And if you feel tipsy, don't breastfeed.
Right.
Because it's in your bloodstream. So that's a nice way to be able to read it.
Yeah.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about special circumstances with your clients? I think sometimes as a birth doula, it's hard because most of my clients, their goal is to breastfeed. And sometimes it's not smooth sailing. And sometimes someone's emotional well-being is being compromised. And that might mean supplementing with donated breast milk or other means. So can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on supplementing, how you support clients and helping them feel okay if they need that, and not like it's their fault?
Mm-hmm. Oh, we love to talk about that, because the goal is to then, if a mother cannot breastfeed fully, which sometimes happens, I like to talk about that because I feel like I've dealt with that a lot with moms, and the most important thing is to connect with your baby. And we feel that so strongly that we've changed the word from breastfeeding to nursing, because there are moms who cannot breastfeed. You had a mastectomy, you cannot breastfeed.
Mm-hmm.
But you can nurse your baby. So you can hold your baby, or if a mother is a surrogate and she doesn't breastfeed, or she does some breastfeeding, she can hold her baby with that bottle right there, cuddled up nice, close to her, with eye contact, with connection, as if she were breastfeeding, and she can nurse that baby. Or the dad can nurse the baby, or it's the grandma, or whoever it is can nurse that baby as that very important caretaker. Backing up to when she's first discovering that she doesn't have all the milk that she thought she was going to have, and she's now needing to supplement, we'll start by saying, how important is it to you to breastfeed? And if it's very important, we'll help her to get the baby to fall in love with the breast by doing supplementing at the breast. Instead of immediately going to the bottle as a supplement. If you keep that baby connected to the nipple as this is your source, they will stay with this idea that your breast is home for them. Mm-hmm. And we find that so important because the mother wants more than anything to feel this deep connection to her baby. And if she can do that at the breast as the first most important, or at least be able to sustain that and then eventually add in the bottles as well as breast and bottle, terrific.
Jennifer always has this beautiful way of talking about the right brain, left brain emotions with new motherhood, and how our right brain is really ignited because that's what feels and senses, and that's what our baby is, all right-brained. And so, and our left brain is like, calculating and logistics and all that stuff. So as soon as you kind of like have to turn on your left brain to think about pumping, calculate things, schedule things, you're getting out of that mode with your baby of connection, being productive.
And I want to add to that we have a funny way of looking at mothers, and we diss them by saying, oh, I've just got my mom brain right now. And what is that? That mom brain is that wildfire right brain, which is ignited with birth and breastfeeding.
And it's intuitive.
It's intuitive.
It's intuitive.
I'm wondering if you guys would be willing to share a little bit about your own birth experiences, as much or as little as you want to share, and how perhaps that impacted what you do now with serving mothers.
I have very fond memories of my birth. I feel like that was my turning point in my life into strength, into empowerment. I mean, you don't see it at the time, but when you look back, you go, wow, look what I did. You do. You feel like, if I could do that, I can do anything. Well, going into childbirth, I expected that I was going to have a natural birth. It wasn't a question for me to do it any other way. It might have been the timing. My babies were born in the 90s. Back then, home birth or natural birth in the hospital was common. They had birthing rooms. And it was
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was what I wanted to do. So I had my girlfriend who I made my documentary with at my side. She was a former midwife. So she came to the birth as well. And I loved my doctor, my pediatrician. My OB was lovely. I got to labor in that hospital. First of all, I took a class. I took a Bradley class.
I did that too.
Which I loved. Yeah. I loved that class. And I took a breastfeeding class. The Bradley class said, you labor at home as long as you can until you lose your inhibition. Well, little did I know that I was laboring at home, and it turned into a Sunday morning that I was laboring at home, stark naked, hair down. It was all the way down to my waist. It just looked like, I don't know what, a goddess, I guess. And my neighbors were going to take us to the hospital. They came to the door, and I went to that door naked with my hair down, not thinking a thing of it. But in hindsight, that was the time to go because I had lost my vision. And sure enough, I got to that hospital with just a couple hours of pushing to begin. It was tough. I remember I was moaning, and my sister came to the birth to film, and they said, "Follow the sound of the beached whale."
Oh,
to my sister.
God.
That's how she found me.
That is so funny.
Because I went to, you go to this very, you go to this very deep, deep guttural.
You have to
get through that, right? So I gave birth naturally in that hospital. My doctor was patient. My lovely friend / midwife saw that I was losing a little oxygen. She took the mask of oxygen, put it on my face while I was struggling a bit. The doctor said, we need to get that baby out. We're having some decelerations here. Next push, if you don't get that baby out, we're going to vacuum. And that put me into high mode, and I pushed with every might and fury that I could. Broken vessels in my eyes. The baby did too. But we survived fantastic. Didn't need any vacuum as a result of pushing just right.
Amazing.
Healthy boy. They took him away from me for a moment to section him because he had meconium as he was coming out. The doctor had to come. The pediatrician had to come. They took him just for a minute. And even, I just remember him just being across the room while they were sectioning him out. And I was just yearning for him. I needed him. And as soon as he came back to me, it was the most incredible experience of my life.
Mm-hmm. I love your stories. I've never heard them before.
Sweet.
My best friend growing up, her mom was a midwife. And then she became a midwife. And she had her first baby before I had mine, and she had a home birth. So that was, and my mom, I was born in the hospital, but unmedicated birth. So I think...
I'm going to ask you, what hospital were you born at?
Oh my gosh. Probably Northwestern.
Oh, Northwestern. I was born at Columbus, but it's not a hospital anymore.
I don't even know. Yeah, that's so funny. And I don't think it was called Northwestern at the time. I think it was called like Evanston Hospital or something.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
I assume I was born there. I've actually never asked. Mom, if you're listening. But so I think I had the mental framework of that's what you do. So when I got pregnant, I saw an OB for my first trimester because I wanted all of my scans and everything covered by insurance. But then I started seeing a midwife probably at like maybe 10, 12 weeks, I would think. And she was this incredible woman. We were living out in the Inland Empire at the time. I remember her telling me like her license number in California for the midwives was like 11 or something. Like she was just like an OG midwife. I think sometime after my daughter was born, she hit her 1,000th baby. So she was just this like wealth of information. And she had a few student midwives who were just lovely also. And so it was just this like team of women. I think at her birth, I want to say there were like maybe 4 or 5. I think I was in labor for about 17 hours. And I remember it being like just so intense. And we also did the Bradley method, and gosh, I remember, I think I thought I was in transition before I was, and then I learned I wasn't actually in transition, and like kind of had a meltdown over that because I thought that whatever reason, it seemed like it was at that point of progression where I was like, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Like, this is so intense. I was given some homeopathic. I don't even know what it was, because what she said was that apparently there's 2 muscles that need to contract to make things go, and they were both contracting but not in unison. So she gave me something to kind of help bring them together. And then my daughter was actually a little bit tilted in my uterus, and so I remember she put one hand up me and held my daughter's head, and with her other hand she kind of like scooted her so that her spine was against like the center of my stomach. And that was like exceedingly painful. And then immediately after that, my water just like broke, and I went into the birth tub. I think pushed for maybe 30, 45 minutes, and out she came. And I caught her myself. I put I kind of felt her, and I felt her little face. And I remember like one midwife was holding my perineum. My husband was like behind me in the tub, and the other one was like videoing the whole thing. And I just kind of like, they let me do it on my own. And I remember like I grabbed her arm under her arms and I pulled her up to my chest, and it was just like the coolest. Like, it's like the most amazing thing. And then we didn't know if we were having a boy or a girl. I was just like holding her, just like, oh my gosh, thank God that's over. Yeah. And like, my baby's here. Like, couldn't believe it. And my husband behind me, I remember him going, well, what is it? And I looked at him, I'm like, it's a baby. What do you mean? I'm like, no, is it a boy or a girl? And I was like, oh, I like didn't even, I had to even, but then we looked and we're like, oh, it's a girl. And
oh, that is so
exciting.
Sweet.
Yeah.
It is so sweet.
And then we moved from the tub to my room. It was just so beautiful. I remember they like made me food, and they helped me, like they helped her latch for the first time, and they helped me shower, like just kind of all these things that you don't even think you need. And then in that moment, you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
That was all amazing.
And I'm sure they cleaned up.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Like
everyone's worried about like having a home birth. Yeah. Like, I don't want a messy home.
No.
Like, no, your home is
oh my gosh, it was
spotless.
Clean. Yeah, the tub was gone. Like, I remember that whenever I went out from my bedroom again, 3 days later, whenever that was, you know, I remember just being like, wait, where's everything? And my husband was like, oh, like, they took it, like, day of. I'm like, they drained that. Where'd they drain it? And he's like, I don't know. I wasn't there. Like, you know, it's just, they did everything.
Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
That's
I
beautiful.
love that.
Yeah.
What a service.
Yeah, and so with my second, it was also way faster. He tricked me, like, starting at 36 weeks, I was like, I am having contractions. Like, these are not Braxton Hicks. These are, like, contractions. I remember my midwife I had used a different midwife this time, and she was also just, like, I had two, and they were both just, like, the best. I loved them. And she was like, okay, well, you know, I can't deliver at home until 37 weeks. And I was, like, talking to him, like, you stay in there. But then he was born. They were both born at 40 plus 2. So he stayed in for the whole time, and I remember I woke up, I was like, oh, this is it. Okay. This is the day. And I took my daughter to school, and I remember, like, walking around, and I was working at the time. And so I remember I was like, at some point the midwives came over to, like, check me out because I was supposed to have an appointment that day, but they came to me, and one of them did a rebozo on me to kind of, like, help move the baby down. We picked up my daughter from school, and I remember I was, like, in the bath because I was, like, just not feeling well, but I think I was in denial that I was in labor. Like, I think I was, like, thinking I was going to have this 17-hour labor again, so I was like, I got hours. Like, I'm just going to hang. I remember I took a work call, and I got off the phone, and then I was like, my husband was like, okay, I'm going to go take Lila for a walk. And I was like, no, call the midwives. Like, this is happening. And then he was born, I think, like 2 hours later.
Wow.
Yeah. I labored for most of his labor and what I didn't realize, my bathtub and then the birth tub. And then he was born, though, in my bed because I think I started to push, and there was a little bit, I think I was bleeding a little bit when I started pushing. So she wanted to check me. And then as she was checking me, he just, like, flew out and he was born in call. So that was super cool.
Wow.
So they opened his little sack, and we also didn't know what he was. And so Kate came on my chest, and my daughter was in the room when he was born. And so she got to, like, witness the whole thing.
Wow.
Jennifer, is this the first time you're hearing
Yes.
her?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. We've never talked about it.
How
before.
special.
Yeah.
It's so special.
Yeah, very
that.
special.
They were both just, like, I mean, such empowering experiences, and in different ways, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the first time you're like, I was so proud of myself. Like, I can't believe I did that.
You can't believe you did it.
Like, I just
and then
felt
once it's
like
over,
a
it's over.
powerhouse. Yeah.
Because the natural birth, you immediately, the pain's over.
Right.
It's gone.
It's gone.
You're strong.
I didn't need any stitches.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
You don't suffer.
Like,
amazing.
it was just, breastfeeding experience was probably more difficult with both of them than my birth, especially with my son. My daughter, for some reason, she breastfed pretty easily. It was painful, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I had a lot of help, but it wasn't like there weren't any, like, major issues that we needed to overcome. But my son, and now that I do what I do, I'm, like, surprised with myself because I'm like, that's interesting, because my supply was really low with him, much lower than with my daughter, and he was, like, I think just a little bit weaker maybe of a baby, and so he just, like, needed help. I was, like, pumping and, you know, supplementing and breastfeeding and for a long time. I think in total it was probably 2 or 3 weeks
of supplementing and pumping.
Yes, it was, you know, the whole, like,
to get him really strong.
And also to get my supply going, because it was just, it took a while.
And usually with second babies, you have more.
Exactly. I think I may have in the end. I also, talking about tongue ties, I'm pretty sure he has a tongue tie that we should have. And I remember at the time they were like, yeah, he has a tie, but I took him to an ENT and they said no. So I was like, okay. And knowing what I know now, I would have taken him to a specialist. But I didn't know at the time. You know, you don't know what you don't know. So I think that might have helped him a lot to have it for him specifically. But at the same time, he ended up breastfeeding for over 2 years. He doesn't have any speech issues.
Amazing.
You know, so it's kind of one of those things to really, well.
I love what you said, too, about being in denial.
Yeah.
Because that's something I tell first-time moms all the time. Like, I want you super relaxed. I want you to stay in denial for as long as possible, because when someone gets really excited or worked up or anxious and becomes a busybody, then that can prolong their experience. And if you're just like, nah, I'm just gonna hang out and see how this goes, like, there's an energy to that of just being more relaxed and open.
Interesting.
Well, I would love for you guys to chat about how you engage with the community. What projects are you working on? And if you can maybe also the Milky Way movie a little bit, and where can people find it and where can people find you?
Well, the film, which came out in 2014, is available on Amazon Prime, Hulu, Vudu, a lot of streaming networks, but not on Netflix.
Yes, everywhere other than Netflix.
Pretty much. It was a feature film documentary, full length. We had it scored by a fantastic couple. He was a orchestra director. So
Wow.
then they were pregnant, and they met us at a film festival and saw that we needed to have music, and they were so excited to join us and write the music for our film. They wrote the villain scene, and me, I played the hero, so I took you on a journey. So he writes the music accordingly. It was pretty cool. So when you watch it, make sure you have a good sound system. We got to film people who are in my practice, as well as I call them my superheroes. They're the ones who are like the experts who I've been following for years and who taught me the knowledge I know. I thought it was going to become obsolete, and after about 5 years, that's what we told ourselves, that would be done. And unfortunately, it's still very valuable today. I came up with this idea that we need art, because when we traveled I got to travel in Spain. My son was there while we were filming. We didn't have a name yet for the film, and we were looking for that name, and I was also just amazed that when you travel in Europe, breastfeeding art is everywhere, and it promotes breastfeeding to see art, and we didn't have that here in America. So I was really gung-ho with the idea that we needed art here and places to nurse and to normalize it. So up came the idea of creating, which we call the Art of Nurture, which is a place for benches to be created for moms to sit, to be able to breastfeed in public on a bench with a painting of a mother nursing a baby, to call to attention that this is a beautiful thing and that you too can do it in public.
So there's 5 benches, and they're all over Los Angeles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
awesome.
they're in, unfortunately, we don't have any in like public spaces, which is the goal, but they're all in private spaces. So there's one at the Kindred Space Birth Center in LA. There's one at a place called Sovereign. There's one at a community garden in Compton, Willowbrook. There's going to be one at the school. And then at and there's one at Dr. Pinto's office, and she's one of the infant tongue-tie specialists.
That's amazing. Yeah. What a special project.
Yeah, it really is fun.
It's really fun. You can find us for that project on Instagram at The Art of Nurture. It's a work in progress. I'm just going to say that out loud.
It always is.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes. And then where can people find you guys if they want to reach out or have questions or perhaps want to work with you?
We have a website called, it's www.themilkywaymamas.com, and you can also find us on Instagram at the Milky Way Mamas.
Thank you so much for sharing today, and I just so appreciate you both taking the time and sharing your expertise and wisdom, because I think a lot of new moms can benefit from what you guys have to share.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It's been so
really
fun.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share with friends and family, and stay tuned for the next episode.